We're here. We have a special guest. So for anyone that is new to the channel, this is Danny. Danny's one of the fastest on-road racers here local in Saskatoon, and probably one of the fastest dudes in Western Canada, like top 3.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So he is brand new to the new TC8. This is the fresh car. So we're going to do an unboxing of the steel spec kit, and then we're going to go through his car, and he's going to kind of give us a little bit of some tips and tricks on things that he did to the car while he was building it, and some setup stuff too. So moving forward, Danny's probably gonna be on a couple more videos. I think we're gonna do some like 10 scale off-road, on-road stuff for setup, tips, tricks, things like that. I know some people are looking for Gary Lanzer, but I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
I'm budget Gary.
Oh, you're budget Gary. We'll just get right into the kit build. The unboxing of the kit's gonna be pretty meh, because I mean, it's just pieces and bags, right? So it's pretty lackluster. I'll just kind of let you go through this, and you kind of tell me things that you saw in the bags or kind of like tips and tricks while you're building it. And we can just kind of go from there, I guess.
For sure, yeah, definitely.
So we already cracked the box, so.
Yeah,
just FYI.
Seals are broken. So obviously manual out first, followed by the chassis plate. This is the steel edition. This one does not have a resealable bag. I understand the carbon version does, but this one does not. So just something to note there. Going through there, there's a bag with a very pink label on it. These are some of the parts that you'll need for bag 6. They did a bit of a running change. They have some thinner shock O-rings, I believe, and then some different screws for the pistons within the shocks. So just make note of that and put those aside for bag 6.
I was gonna say what is bag 6, but that definitely starts making a little bit more sense.
Narrows
on
it down
bag
a little
6.
bit. Yeah. So bag 6 is the shock bag, obviously.
And then the shocks on these are kind of going to the trend of super short stroke.
Extremely, yeah. I think these are 9mm stroke. There's some other cars in the market that are 7, 8, that sort of range.
So it's definitely the new trend of like keeping everything still being a shock car, just as low slung in the chassis as they can keep it.
Yeah, a few years ago there was definitely a trend towards the low center of gravity side of things, which is where the steel chassis comes from as well. And the super short shocks. So other cars use different styles of dampers, but there's still some huge benefits to actual coil over style suspension that this car is looking to take advantage of. So
yeah, because you're coming from an Automatics, which
that's
is
correct,
probably one of the lowest LCG cars, just considering they don't have a traditional stand-up shock. They don't do any of that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a change for you, back to like old extra days.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, so far the car's been extremely performant, and there's a lot of the benefits of shock cars that I'm already kind of seeing, just in how the car kind of absorbs bumps and enters corners and things like that other car maybe didn't give me as much of. So
yeah, so he's just being a little bit humble. He's about a 10th quicker with this car than his Automatic, so just put that in there.
So far so good. Yeah.
Okay, so continuing on with the bag, so we got through the shocks and the chassis there. What's next?
Yeah, so I guess I'll dig through the bit of the box here and get into bag 1, which is the suspension arms. So that goes along with this bag right here, which is also the bulkheads. The big thing with this bag right here, this is kind of the first bit where you attach the pivot balls to the chassis and then also install the arms on the chassis. So the big thing with that one is there's some very small like pivot ball cups that you have to insert into the arm and then push the arm onto the chassis. Inserting the ball cup into the arm, I think they tell you just to line it up and use pliers. What I did instead is I gave it a bit of a squeeze because it's slightly open on the top, and then just forced it inside the arm just with my finger, because fingers heal, plier marks on ball cups are forever. Yeah. So I'm a bit pickier that way, but yeah, that's a big tip with that one. Moving through, I guess, into bag 2, this is where you get into your diffs. There's a step in this guy where they tell you glue the belt guide onto the outside of the pulley. I initially did not think that was necessary. I found out later that it most definitely is, so do not skip that step. Just use a fine metal point on your CA bottle and just kind of drip glue just around the outside just to get that little bit of an edge in there, and then it'll hang on tight. So.
Fair. And plastic gears as bevels and spiders in here. So
That's
a little
correct.
bit different than some other cars that are giving you steel
Correct.
and kind of like copying and pasting maybe from another model. onto this, right?
Funny enough, actually, this uses the exact same diff internals as the B74.2.
Fair.
Yeah.
So this is the composite gears that you can put in the
that's
the
correct.
D or the carpet car, I guess.
That's correct.
Fair.
Yeah. This uses the plastic HTC gears, so not the LTC gears, but the HTC gears.
Fair.
And that's just to give the diff a little bit more of a firmer action on throttle, which these cars tend to want. Makes a little more on power steering and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, we're also running on black ozite carpet.
That's correct.
Very, very high grip.
Yeah.
Hence the steel chassis versus the carbon.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I will say there have been a lot of people that have been moving towards the steel chassis, even on asphalt situations, even in lower grip. The carbon option is more for sort of unprepped tracks, parking lot tracks, that sort of level of traction.
Okay.
But if you're getting into like a prepared surface, like kind of a week in, week out track, like you're there all the time, then the steel starts to become the better option of the two.
So going to kind of expanding on that a little bit more, this past year's Worlds 2024 on a prepped surface,
correct,
were the team guys running the steel chassis, or were they kind of testing carbon to steel?
I believe at that point, I think the car was still in a prototype stage, but the two team guys that were there, Kyle and Rick, were both running the steel chassis.
Fair.
Pretty much full time. And I think pretty much every team at that race ran a steel chassis, except for maybe one or two people on one of the
So
other
they
teams,
were the oddity versus the guys running steel. Okay,
correct.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So this will probably be the more common kit for majority of people.
I would say so. Yeah. For most people, obviously the carbon chassis is available as an option if you do need it. And if you have a carbon kit and you're looking for something a little more low CG, a little more towards kind of the steel side of things, this is also available as an option as well.
Fair. So you can buy either or depending on where
correct.
you're at. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so what's next in the unboxing here?
Yeah, so then you get into bag 4, which is where you start to kind of put together some of the ancillaries, so some of the turnbuckles, servo mount is in here, bell crank, all that stuff. Moving through into bag 5, which is just the roll bars, plenty of extremely small parts to drop and lose in the carpet if you're not careful. So
be careful on that one.
Be careful with bag 5. Missed bag 3 there for a second, but this is sort of the bag where you do all of your hubs. All 4 hubs on this car are the same, which is great from a parts perspective. It means, you don't have to stock, a right rear and a right,
Yeah. So if anyone knows, maybe there is one brand right now that has very corner specific stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're running, say, any car with an X to start its name, you might understand this struggle. And I mean, that's where I feel this car makes a lot of sense. Sure, the arms you do have to buy in a big parts tree because the caster is actually built into the arm. But on the flip side of things, if you really write off a corner once or twice in a weekend and you just have, say, a 6-degree versus a 4-degree arm,
correct,
at least it keeps you going. You're not doing something absolutely crazy trying to make something that isn't supposed to work.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, back to the hubs again. One thing to note in this step is there are different heights of axles on each of these hubs. So just make note of I think +1 is the kit option. So just make note of +1 hubs for the axle height and make sure you use those. Don't get them mismatched across the car.
That would suck. Yeah, that would suck.
And then back in order again, we've got bag 8, which is kind of the center driveline, the battery holders. And then into bag 9, which is just largely some ancillary stuff, the oil for your shocks, the diff, some thread locker, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so anyone that's built an 8-scale nitro car, I know Jeremy and I giggled about this. There's one guy local that mixed up the thread lock that was actually air filter oil and built the car with air filter oil instead of thread lock.
They're both the same blue.
Yeah, this is legit thread lock, so not air filter oil. So you're mint.
Correct.
So I hope that person watches this video and kind of gets a chuckle out of that.
Hopefully.
Inside joke.
Yeah. Yeah, and then kind of last but not least, this bag it's bag 7, but it's ultimately kind of at the end. It's your body posts, your bumper, body height adjusters. One nice thing about this kit is it includes some aluminum body height adjusters in the kit. with different positions for so you don't have to always go a full hole if you're adjusting your body height.
Nice.
Or necessarily use O-rings. I do have some on my car just because it kind of softens things a little bit, but you can do all the body height adjustment right out of the kit. So,
nice.
Yeah.
And a TPU bumper too, which is really, really slick.
Yeah.
I know they got a lot of flack for that bumper, but
they did. It's actually a pretty nice bumper overall.
The production one looks way better than the kind of
does.
first prototype parts.
Yeah, their promo shots were a little too close.
Yeah.
Macro lens too good.
And then the last thing is just some AE decals and some 3M double-sided tape. Okay, so now talking about your specific car. Obviously, this car's hit the track a couple times. Like I said, you've been extraordinarily quick with it right out of the box. So walk us through some of maybe the updates you did or kind of the deviation that you've got away from kit setup and kind of what the thought process was on why you changed those parts.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, so I guess first of all, this car does have a little bit of a crisis of conscience. It's more set up for modified in general, but then it's got a bit of a spec motor in it and spec gearing, obviously. So that aside, the major updates that I made from the kit to this car so far have been titanium ball studs all around the car. Titanium turnbuckles, again, just to kind of shave weight from the top of the car. The titanium screw kit from 1UP Racing. Shout out to Eric and Randy down at 1UP.
Were the turnbuckles and the ball cups also 1UP, or were those kind of mixed match?
No,
brands?
those are factory teams, so those come right from Associated.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I've been really happy with them so far. I mean, as far as weight savings, I didn't weigh it out gram for gram, but I mean it is significant.
Is the kit stuff aluminum?
The kit stuff is steel.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, the kit stuff is
weight
steel.
savings in comparison
very,
to...
very large weight savings. At least I believe it's steel. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me, but
Fair.
But there is a pretty significant weight savings between running the kit stuff and then the stuff that I went to. So
For sure. So yeah, going into the next thing I see, talking about weight and talking about like mod, you have a lot of battery weights in here and a very, very small battery in comparison to a lot of people.
I do. Yeah. In modified, we do tend to run the shorty batteries. For stock racing, we would normally run a full length battery. So obviously I have this car set up with a shorty right now, but I would recommend the extra carbon battery retainers as well as the weight kit. There's one available for shorty batteries and one available for full length batteries. That are both extremely useful, especially for indoor racing. For indoor racing, we usually just run smaller battery sizes in general because you don't necessarily need the run time that you might need on a large asphalt track or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of the first thing. And then also, I do have even a few extra of the little 10 gram factory team weights. I believe the car does come with, I think, 2, but I've got an extra 2 on there just to kind of make the car balance out a little bit. And I've also mounted my capacitor on the battery side of the car again, just to kind of shift
Disperse
a little more
it
weight.
over.
Yeah. The low profile shorty batteries are exceptional for handling. They are a little bit more difficult to balance with, obviously.
Correct. Yeah, you got to stack a lot of weights in a small space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. So then moving on, what else did you kind of change? Because I mean, that's obviously a big weight change, but was there anything setup wise that you changed? You're like from kit, whether it's like springs or internal shock pistons or anything like that.
Yeah. So this car out of the box is actually pretty exceptional on black carpet, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff out there that the kit setup is extremely safe, very easy to drive, but not necessarily particularly fast.
Correct. Yeah.
This car hit the track with more or less the kit setup, and I was within a tenth of where I was with my previous car that I had for a year plus.
Correct. Yeah. Very hyper tuned for sure.
Yeah. So the biggest changes so far that I've made on them have actually been going to the PSD sleeves in both the front and the rear shocks. And that the pistons are included in the kit for that. So those of you out there that have the kit, you'll notice that there's a set of pistons with 4 holes and a set with 2 holes. The set with 2 holes is actually a slightly smaller outer diameter, and it's meant for the PSD sleeves. So they're a 2 by 0.8 millimeter hole piston. And the piston sleeve, it has a triangular shaped slot in the side of it that basically just changes your damping rate from kind of softer to harder as the shock moves through the stroke. And that, while it does tend to make the car a little bit harder to drive, I've found on pretty much every platform I've run that moving to progressive, at least for our situation, does tend to be a lot faster because it adds quite a bit of grip, it adds quite a bit of response. So it works just as well on this car as it has on other stuff.
For sure. And I mean, Danny's definitely a little bit more aggressive. He wants his cars to turn because he can modulate the steering and the throttle himself to do what it needs to do. So he definitely is like a little bit more of an aggressive car. I think, is kind of the feel that I've always got
Yeah.
with watching your on-road stuff and your 10 scale or 8 scale off-road stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Lots of entry steering, a little safer, kind of mid to out.
Yeah.
Is usually how I would set my stuff up. So
fair enough. Yeah, very point and shoot.
yeah. So moving, I guess, from the internals of the shock, the only, I guess, other big change I made from a setup perspective so far, at least on the top of the car, is actually moving to the progressive blue front springs. The car comes with linear grays, which I think are 15.7 pound spring rate. The progressive blues are 14.1 to 16.5, I think. And what I found that kind of helped with is just getting the car down into the corner a little bit quicker, but then it not being maybe quite as aggressive from center off. So again, just kind of trending towards that, aggressive in, but safer out, so I can get on the throttle hard and kind of get out of the corner.
Makes
safely.
sense. Yeah,
So,
you get that initial weight transfer, but then it holds the car up having that heavier spring rate.
correct.
Okay, that's pretty neat.
Yeah. And then I guess moving through down to the bottom of the car, obviously for carpet racing, the trend over the last few years has to be moving to higher and higher roll centers. So I went with the carbon shims, and I went to 2 millimeters in the rear, which I believe is kit setting, and then 1.5 in the front for the lower roll center. So just to get that roll center a little bit higher, again, make the car just a little bit more aggressive into the corner, but not, doesn't lay down on the front quite as much, just carries a little more corner speed.
So talking about that, because I know you chatted about this before when you were building your kit.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone building these kits, highly recommend the carbon roll center, essentially height adjusters.
Yeah.
So instead of doing individual like ball stud washers or essentially keyed with a slot in them washers, those carbons are just one insert, and then you can lock it down. Everything's happy, and it's so much easier to make an adjustment.
Yeah, especially on the steel chassis. The kit comes with some aluminum shims that you do have to just very slightly sand the ID on the one edge just to make sure that they fit okay.
Yeah.
The carbon shims sort of eliminate the need for that. So
fair. So anything else that you have done to the car found as kind of a necessity?
Unfortunately, sometimes I do still hit things. So I did decide to go with the carbon fiber bumper brace. That was largely a durability option more than a performance option. But I mean, it also does look nice.
Yeah, carbon bits are always nice and fancy.
Yeah.
So no, it's really nice. How did you outfit the car electronics wise? Because I know you are a sponsored driver, so you do get some different things that you are required to run as well.
Right. Yeah. So I've got the Black Box 610 for the speed control. I got the SP5 215 in there right now, but obviously for modified racing, I would probably be on a 5-turn Sonic, and then the shorty Reedy Zapper, the 4800 LP,
nice
in there for a battery.
Fair enough. And this is the same battery you use in all your 10 scale stuff as well?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's good, nice crossover.
It's kind of the battery of choice for 10 scale buggy racing and 10 scale touring car modified racing. It tends to be the good option.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair.
Yeah.
So after we talk about your car, was there anything in the manual that you would say like, hey guys, just be kind of cautious? I know we did walk through a lot of it while we were doing the unboxing.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any issues you had with the manual? Or was there any things that you would kind of like throw a caveat on? Just because like, hey, I found that if you did it in this orientation, it was much easier.
Yeah, so there's a few small things. I did have to do a little bit of sanding kind of on the outer ball studs on the rear toe links. And that could just be a tire thing. We run Gravity RC tires, and we have had some issues with clearances with other cars in these in the past, so just dremeling it to kind of clear the inside of the wheel, and then just dremeling very slightly the top of the ball stud, or the ball cup, that goes underneath the top deck to the steering rack, just to make sure that it never fouls the top deck.
Gotcha.
The last thing I will mention too, and this is more of a safety thing, it won't necessarily happen, but I have seen it happen on other cars, so I'm a bit paranoid. I do actually Loctite in the screws all the way through the countersink. So on the countersink on the bottom of the chassis, they actually have some Loctite just on that surface, just to lock the screw to the bottom of the chassis.
It ain't coming out.
No,
unless you want it to.
Move. Yeah, if that moves, several other things have gone wrong.
Fair.
So
yeah, because I mean, that was always now the fear of these new kind of floating servo mounts, right? You have one locator pin, two screws, and if one of those screws come out, now that whole servo can shift and move, and that's throwing off your trim. That's doing some funky stuff.
Yeah.
So no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Are you still using the factory AE spur on here, or did you change your gear ratio? Because AE does come with some different kind of spur tooth count wise, right?
Yeah, so the kit comes with a 114 and a 92. R-Track that doesn't necessarily work for spec racing. The 114 for modified is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
For spec racing, I went to a 96, and this is one of the X-ray offset spur gears. So
And obviously they fit.
Yeah, and they're really durable and whatever. So for club racing, kind of week in, week out, they're perfect.
Perfect. Awesome. Anything else you want to mention about the kit or anything that you've seen?
Nope. Just want to thank my sponsors for the opportunity to kind of get, hands on this stuff early. Reedy, Team Associated, Factory Team, and all the guys over there. Thanks very much.
Yeah, because you got this about a week and a half, 2 weeks earlier than we got this one.
That's right.
Yeah. So this really helps us kind of make these videos for everyone and kind of be ahead of the trend for sure. So thank you so much for Danny for coming in and showing his awesome cars out. And like I said, you'll definitely start seeing him a lot more on some of his videos. So Sean was on the last one, and Danny are definitely going to be doing a lot more of the setup stuff and trying to help everybody out with things, because I mean Danny's been racing for what, 20 years now?
On both that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a minute, and Sharp is about the same. So it's really awesome to have all of this wealth of knowledge. So if you guys want to, post some comments down below on any questions about the TC8, I'll definitely kind of pass them on to Danny and get them answered. And if you have any ideas of things that you want to talk about future videos, whether it's 10 scale on-road, 10 scale off-road on the dirt, or anything to do with high grip setup, this is your guy to talk to for sure. So thank you so much for coming on and showing us your TC8.
Yeah,
and now Jeremy's got to build this box of parts that's sitting on the counter. So thank you everyone so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.